Welcome back for our 16th message from the host. This is going to come out right before episode 100. That's still a mystery to the listeners. Today we're going to welcome on a Dallas DA that started a new project, a much needed project for the district attorney's office, but we're going to give a few mentions to some people and supporters before we get to that. I want to take the time to update what's going on with the show and say thank you for some of the special folks that supported our mission. QT, thank you for supporting our golf tournament that's going to be coming up this fall. I want to say a very special congrats to the amazing young woman, Callie Behrens. She just made a DEA special agent. She's the daughter of former DPD Spencer Behrens and his wife, April, who's also a first responder and RN. This family is very special to me as they somehow trusted me in babysitting their kids 20-something years ago. I think that they must have scraped the bottom of the barrel to get to me to go out for date night with their 4 little kids. And it was pretty much me just putting them to bed and watching something on HBO. But I watched these kids grow from being literally babies, and now they're military, special agents. It's really impressive and a very special family to me. Camden, Devin, Sierra, and Callie, love you. Very special thank you to Legends Fit for hosting the Heroes Fair. A lot of vendors that come out, and we're going to steal some for our DPD Wellness Fair that's coming up in September. So for today's episode, and you know these messages are very loose and wild, but they're not too loose and wild today. We actually have real professionals behind the mic today. Sergeant Figueroa is here.
Yeah, we're the loose and wild ones.
We're the loose and wild. I think the listeners know that. They want to welcome on a very special guest co-host, Amanda. Tell the listener who you are.
Hi, my name is Amanda Noyes. I'm a licensed clinical social work supervisor, and I am with Finding Freedom Therapy. We are a very small but fierce little practice. We specialize in the more horrific or ongoing traumas. So we kind of consider ourselves the practice that works the traumas that can possibly make other therapists cry. So we started with a veteran population, which is very near and dear to my heart, as I lost my brother-in-law in combat in 2005 in Iraq. And it expanded to first responders and frontline workers from when I did medical social work back in the day. And we've just been able to kind of grow. We've got 3 clinicians and 1 admin, and love the work we do.
Well, the ATO is lucky to have you. And we're going to be expanding our counselor list, and we're going to be coming to you for some...
Yes.
For some.
I would love that.
Yeah, you've sent me some names.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do it. We're going to open it back up for go through the process and get more on board because we need them. So today's guest, I've known her for a while. I met her back when I was in legal, just through email really, and then we finally met in person when she came to us with this new initiative that she wanted to start up for the Dallas DA's office. Jennifer, welcome to the mic. I know you've listened to some of these.
I have. This podcast is actually what kind of spurred the idea. I'm Jennifer Morse, commonly known as Jenny. I started at the DA's office in 2004 and have been a prosecutor since then, with the exception of a year and a half that I spent at a nonprofit that fights international sex trafficking of children. Wow.
Okay. Well, you led me right into that. So the idea we're talking about is basically she started up a wellness initiative for the Dallas DA's office.
Yes.
And that was March of 2023. Can you walk us through that?
I think I reached out to you mid to end of March 2023. I had been listening to the podcast. The wonderful and amazing Michelle Shugart was on. I wanted to hear her version, support her, and just kept listening. And one of the episodes, I believe it was Gordon Fulton, was talking about some of the trauma that he experienced. I believe it was a car accident that he had seen. And the mother, the moment that hit me, kind of the light bulb moment, was when he talked about the mother just yelling out and kind of falling out, I guess is the image that I have, with grief and with pain and all of the things that she was experiencing, losing her child. And just in that moment, I thought, I've watched so many mothers fall out, grandmothers fall out during, different trials, or just the grief that we see when we're interviewing parents with children who have been abused, or families who have lost a loved one to homicide or manslaughter, anything like that. And it just gave me a different perspective on what could be trauma, because I think the common thought, and it was mine up until I reached out to Joe and went, I don't know what this is, but is that we don't have trauma, right? We're not getting shot at. We're not responding to dead bodies and picking people off the street, and even, PES is responding to the scenes, and they're responsible for picking up shell casings and all of that. We don't do that, right? And so I think for a long time, and there's probably still a lot of people that think this, but that we as prosecutors don't have trauma. And so I think that was the first moment where I had, that idea that we might actually have trauma. So that was when I reached out to Joe. And I remember I sent an email and was just like, this is the craziest thing. What am I doing? Sent him an email and said, hey, I was listening to this podcast. It gave me an idea. And the reason it kind of all came together, I at the time was one of the deputy chiefs over misdemeanor. So I was in charge of the intern program, and then obviously supervising the amazing brand new prosecutors. And a lot of them were having, not a lot of them, but a handful of them had some issues with, especially interns. They've never seen anything like this. And we put them in felony courts where they're immediately first day, second day looking at, videos of people dying. And so we had an intern come in that was having some issues with that, as well as some of our misdemeanor folks that were, just struggling with some mental health issues. And so I felt like I didn't have the resources as a supervisor to properly help them. We had EAP, but I didn't know who they were going to and if those people were trained. I've had the experience of, when I was seeing a therapist back when I was in child abuse, of telling them about everything that I was going through and having them, having to kind of console them of, no, this is just my day to day. It's okay. And feeling like they probably weren't used to what we do and the crazy things we do. So, just feeling like I didn't have the resources I wanted to have as a supervisor to support my folks and my team. And, so just was initially reaching out to Joe to just say what resources could be out there for our people. Is it something that we could send people to the ATO counselors? Is it something, bigger than that? I don't know. And I will say Joe has been so supportive this whole time. And there have been a number of days where I've reached out to him and been like, I can't, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. And he's just been very, very positive and supportive. So thank you, Joe.
Well, you're welcome. I believe in your mission, and I know that it's very needed, because I think there's a misconception on trauma and actually being boots on. People feel you have to be boots on the ground. You have to be in the middle of it. And you have to actually be there and see, smell, hear everything. A lot of detectives, they don't see. They're not necessarily boots on the ground either. They get the case after the fact, and they have to do a follow-up, watch videos, interview suspects, deal with grieving witnesses, complainants, victims, family members. Y'all have to do that as well. Y'all have to watch hours of body cam. You have to watch hours of surveillance video. You see, from cell phone dumps. You have to watch that and comb through pictures.
I mean, jail calls alone are traumatic. Having to listen to some of the things that they're doing with their significant others.
That secondary trauma is very real, and you guys probably get into it more in detail, and the follow-up, and you probably learn more about the case, much more than the responding officer does, because a lot of times we'll respond to a scene and then we just deal with whatever's going on at the moment, but then we're in the back of our minds, we're like, I wonder whatever happened with that case. You know?
That's true.
Well, secondary trauma is very real. It's not just in the first responder world. And Amanda, I have you here for a reason, because when I was I love what you're doing, and I'm proud that you're an ATO counselor, but also your expertise. And can you talk on that secondary trauma?
Absolutely. And you could even hear it a little bit in your voice, the things that you've had to go through.
That may just be nervousness. I'm not really sure.
Well, they were heavy cases, and the cases with the children are very hard. Our country's just a little bit, I like to say, archaic when it comes to psychology. We like to categorize things, which has its place to kind of understand what's going on. There's PTSD, there's secondary traumatization syndrome, or STS, which is kind of a category disorder. So it's not actually a diagnostic, which is both good and bad, because honestly, it's not a mental illness. But the DSM, which is what we diagnose with, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's just based on statistics. That's it. So it's just a way to categorize things, and I think it misses quite a bit, because in general, if you were combing through videos and photos and all of these things, you're going to have a response. It's a natural, appropriate response to some very abnormal things. Y'all have a very disproportionate exposure to these things. So I think we get caught up in trying to quantify and qualify what PTSD is and what trauma is and what's the diagnosis and what's the disorder and how do we name it. But it really doesn't matter. What it comes down to is trauma. And I don't really honestly care what the DSM says, and I don't care what the qualifiers are for PTSD. If someone comes in and has something going on like that, we treat it. We treat the symptoms, we look at what's going on, because it is very real. And I think that I love what you're doing. And I really believe that this needs to be everywhere. We need to be doing it with frontline workers, with ER doctors, with ICU,
yes,
with teachers in some areas, and honestly, therapists. Now, we're set up a little bit better because our grad school, for most of us, teaches us how to be healthy and all the things that we need to do that we later teach you, and like resiliency that I know First has done some resiliency training with y'all. But in general, I think the purpose is to worry less about what the diagnostic is and what it's called, and look at it for what it is. If you are combing through these things and it is impacting you and you are having symptoms and you're looking at this and feeling almost like a sense of overwhelm and dread because it feels like the whole world is evil or the whole world is sad or hopeless, it means that you are dealing with something, and that's where therapy would come in to help kind of right-size the problem. Because if you have a disproportionate exposure to the most horrible things that our society and our little community experiences, you need a little support to understand that's not everything. It's just the work that you are doing, which is very important and vital work, but that statistic is wrong. Like what you get exposure to and the amount of child cases or death or just kind of the more violent ones, that's not what everyday society feels all the time. We get the good and the bad. Does that make sense?
It does.
So it's understandable that you or anybody dealing with that would have such a strong reaction. It's an appropriate reaction, a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
We talk often about the police culture and firefighter culture and military culture having stigmas attached to the profession when it comes to coming forward to ask for help or to recognize that what you're going through, physical standpoint, mental standpoint, is actually real and it's valid. In the district attorney's world, in the prosecutorial world, and the judicial side, because that's where when the police are done and the detective gets their hands on it, that's the partnership. We send that to you, and we have to work together to get prosecution, hopefully, to get some kind of justice for the family and the victims, and so that's an added pressure as well. In your culture, what have you seen when it comes to being open to this?
So when I started in the office in 2004, it was very much a suck it up, deal with it, everything's fine.
Sounds familiar.
And well, I think we were hanging out with you guys a lot back then too. But it was very much everybody else is handling this. Why can't I? Or
they weren't actually.
This is fine. I look back now and think we had a lot of happy hours. Maybe that was how we were handling. But I think I have seen, especially with this new generation that's coming in, they're much more in touch with their emotions, with self-care, with wanting to honor themselves. And I think my generation, which that makes me sound really old, but I think we were taught focus on the end goal, and it doesn't really matter what happens to you. You put your head down, you work, you get it done. And so I didn't really think that anybody else was having an issue with it.
They just weren't talking about it.
They just weren't talking about it, probably, yes. So I think I've seen the evolution of that, maybe a little bit more acceptance. And I think I've also seen a change in prosecution from, when I started in misdemeanor in 2004, we had a beef sheet. And if we had a video, an in-car video of the stop on a DWI, that was a great case, right? We didn't have the blood test. We sometimes had the breathalyzer at the jail, and that was it, right? We didn't have now. When they first start out as prosecutors, they've got hours, like you mentioned, Joe, they've got hours of body cam. They've got, in car, there may be 4 officers that respond. They've got to watch all of that. And that's just misdemeanor. Then you go up into felony, and you're watching all of the body cam, the in-cars, listening to jail calls, watching and viewing everything from social media. And I think with the evolution of Discovery, Michael Morton, all of those things, there's this fear that you're going to miss something. Mm-hmm. And that's career ending. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of defense attorneys that are very quick to throw that out. Brady violation, Michael Morton violation. And so
Richard Miles, haha.
all of that. And so I think you comb through everything with this anxiety of not just building your case, but not missing something. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen it change dramatically in that way. And just the sheer volume of things that are required on every single case has just drastically
So you had the
changed.
trauma, the initial the trauma of the case itself, but now you have the added pressure of there's a lot of boxes to check, and being up in legal for all those years and coordinating with you on liaison with the DA's office, I saw it firsthand. Mm-hmm. And it could be a career ender. You got with me and you came over here and you met with us with Jennifer Bolito. We sat down.
Yes.
And you said, hey, we want to do this. You wanted to put together a wellness unit, wellness initiative, or / peer support.
Yeah, I think we didn't know what it was at that point. I think at some point, I can't remember if it was before that meeting. Sarge, you were there as well. Mm-hmm. Lieutenant Rivera was there. I can't remember if it was before that or after that you had me reach out to Dr. T and then to
Tanya Glenn.
Tanya Glenn, yes. Yeah. And kind of sent them the same thing. I don't know if this is trauma, but here's what's going on. Here's what I'm seeing. What can we do? And so it was kind of a combination of all of that, learning, what the 3 pillars of a good program would be, which is training, peer support, and then kind of critical incident response is kind of the 3 things that I've seen.
Those are big ones.
Yeah. And so we built our program really around that. And then, we shamelessly copied y'all's SOP.
Oh, no, we're proud. No, we're glad to help. And we're proud of that. It's an honor for us to help.
Absolutely.
And I think what we found, unfortunately, is officers and emergency personnel, emergency service providers, I think is the exact term in the law. Everyone is covered for liability, but we aren't technically an emergency services provider, which is kind of, prosecutors are kind of the stepchildren of law enforcement. We do a lot of the same things. We see a lot of the same things, but
you're missed.
We're missed. We're not, you guys. We recognize that. We're not on the streets. We're not responding to...
But it still counts.
Thank you. Thank you for saying me. So I think we didn't feel like we had enough liability coverage because, of course, the attorneys,
Attorney's gonna attorney.
we just can't stop. So we are actually trying to, we proposed some legislation changes and trying to add prosecutors to that coverage for liability for peer support. But until then, we didn't feel like we we're covered enough legally to start that.
Did y'all not have any? What did you have before this?
EAP.
Okay.
And some of the supervisors didn't even know what EAP was.
Yeah.
So it was not, there was nothing. We had a couple years ago, I think it was 2019, we had a leader in our office, an amazing man, Justin Lord. We lost, and we had a chaplain come in, maybe one or two, and they were set up. They had hours that you could go and talk to them, but I don't know that anyone really felt comfortable using them. Maybe people did, and I just didn't know. But we also, I was really proud that we actually acknowledged it as an office, and they had the amazing Terry Bentley Hill, come in. I've used amazing about 3 or 4 times. So
no, every time you use it, it's worthy. Trust me.
She is amazing.
The incredible Terry Bentley Hill came and spoke about some of the things that we might go through, and all of that. But that was it. That's all we had.
Okay, so when I remember, as I was in legal at the time, and I was talking to several DAs that were affected by that, and they were just, their hearts were completely crushed by.
Yeah, he was a pillar
happened
in our office. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we take the model here of we get informal leaders and informal and very respected officers and staff of high character to go out and do checkpoints and reach out to people that. It's not Rick from HR reaching out to somebody that somebody's going to roll their eyes and, play on their phone. But you had the opposite. You had that similarly with someone that was a pillar that was struggling clearly with mental health, and nobody knew about it. And then when that happens, it shocked your system.
Yeah, I don't think any of us, and I don't know that we still know if it was just situational with what had happened that night, or if it was an ongoing thing. You
never really know.
Yeah. No. And I don't know that it's important that I need to know, but I think that was a big wake-up call for a lot of us.
So that happens, and always liking the things like that whenever there's a death in a family. Everybody's showing up to your door, ringing the doorbell with a casserole, and then they're giving calls and texts, and then as weeks go on, months go on, especially years, it just goes back to normal, and then and that's really is that a way kind of how it went as far as they had people come in for the incident, and that was a critical incident response. It was reactive, right? So what we try to do now with our unit is be proactive and reaching out before and giving education pieces. I mean, this podcast is a form of education. That's what it's designed for. I mean, hell, it got you in the door.
It started a whole program.
Yeah,
it started a wellness program.
So that this is just a part of it. This is a stage. It's a platform. Continued education, continue to be in front of people, as opposed to most peer support models that we've seen in the past. You train up 10, 15 volunteers, and it's inconsistent, and you train them up, you sit on the sidelines, and you wait for somebody to be in crisis, if they even know to come to you or who you are. So we just wanted to basically reverse that.
Yeah.
Be proactive about it instead of reactive.
I like it.
So after you met with us and you package everything up and you take it to your bosses, tell us how that looked.
Well, so we went to not just Jennifer Bolito, but I think recognize the magnitude of this program. I gathered a few other leaders of our office, and so there's a committee of us, Lauren Black, Jennifer Bolito, Julie Turnbull, and Kim Nesbitt and I, and we wanted to just push the ball forward. I was very lucky that they all 4 of them bought into the idea, they supported the idea, and we went to Judge Crusoe and said, this is what we would like to do. What do you think? And he has been on board from the beginning, and we've been really lucky to have so much support from the top.
Well, we feel the same here with Chief Garcia. I mean, this unit would not be here if it wasn't for his openness and his vision and really progressive thinking.
Yeah.
It's good they can see that, though, because one of the purposes of my practice is to help people get better so they can continue doing what they love. When people buy in from the top, they're actually protecting themselves in the program. The healthier you are, the longer you can do what you're doing and the bigger impact you can make. And if we could just wrap our heads around that in this society and understand that if we're healthy with our mental health, we can keep doing the hard work.
And I think it takes understanding that mental health is part of your health. It's not just this thing that sometimes people deal with. I think it's a vital part of the whole person.
I've seen that movie Inside Out.
They have a new one coming out.
The part two.
Yeah, part
really
2.
good.
Have you seen that?
I have not.
And introduce anxiety.
That's
my
homework
gosh.
for half of my adults. It's
Okay.
amazing. It's very good.
I mean, it's a kids movie. It's a Disney Pixar movie, but it is really good. It's really good for any age. But part 2 is coming out and dealing with teen. It looks like they're delving into teen anxiety and.
Oh gosh. Okay.
You got to see it. It's really good.
Yes.
Surprised my nephews haven't tried to get me to watch it.
That's great. That's one actually I don't mind Carmen watching over and over. So,
Teaches emotions.
yeah,
It just normalizes it. Because
it really does, and it packages it and presents it in a way. It's education. That movie is really education, but they package it in a way that's understandable and entertaining for
and
kids.
why the emotions are needed. Because whether we like it or not, we have emotions. Whether we like it or not, we're human. So we can either ignore our emotions and it doesn't turn out well, or we can get closer, know them, and understand how to manage them.
Yep. So selling to your bosses and getting when did it finally hit you of kind of your watershed moment? This is actually going to happen.
The day that we were standing in the first training.
Okay.
I wasn't really sure we were going to get there.
Dr. T and
Yes.
first. Okay.
Yes. We were lucky enough. We felt like at the time, Tanya was not in the DFW area. And so it was not really logistically possible to bring her in for all the things we were hoping to do. So with First, we felt like they had a very comprehensive program dealing with training and like I talked about, those 3 pillars of the program that we really wanted to utilize their expertise, and knowing that they had dealt a lot with DPD and other law enforcement units and departments throughout the DFW area. We felt like they had the expertise and the experience to help us get through that training.
That's wonderful.
They have a really good grasp on it, and this whole podcast was kind of spawned from a visit with them.
Yeah, anybody that listens to this knows, and I've worn this story out, but it started from their 3-day seminar that is actually coming up in October. We're going to go back to it, but you found out later you do have a connection with a member of First. Can you talk about that story?
Yeah, it was wild. So we show up to the first. I wanted to be at the very first training, make sure everything went off. Luckily, it was a lot of my baby prosecutor. We call them baby prosecutors, but they're adults prosecutors in misdemeanor, because I figured they would be the most, give the most grace if something went wrong.
They're not going to poo-poo on it initially. Okay.
No. I think they bought in pretty easily. But we get there, and Dr. T is introducing me to her team, and I recognized this woman named Tina. And I said, "You look familiar. Did I meet you on a tour? I'm so sorry. I'm not placing it." She said, "No, you prosecuted one of my cases." And I said, "What agency?" And she said, "Carrollton." And I immediately knew exactly what case she was talking about. And I said, "Child abuse case?" "Yep." I was like, "Oh, damn." Like, it just took me back to that case. And it was a case that really had an impact on me. Not only I've talked about her dedication as a detective to that case and to the victim, but also the victim's strength in going through some really horrific things. And she just went above and beyond in some of the actions that she took. And it also was it was so graphic that it affected me. And I think looking back, I would have probably reached out and gotten a little more support, and just been more proactive. But it definitely was the first time that I felt like a case really hit me. Yeah, that's probably a good way to say it. Seeing her and having her be there and knowing she had kind of gone on to do counseling after she retired or left Carrollton, I was so proud of her, and it made sense given all of the efforts she had done. But yeah, it was pretty wild that she was there, and then I was able to use that case and give the details that flooded back immediately, to say, this is why we want you to do this resiliency training. Because when you have this first child abuse case, when you have something that you start having nightmares about the abuse happening to you, and seeing the knife and seeing the blanket in these nightmares, we want you to know you have to reach out.
And that's exactly how you get that buy-in and get people to connect with the whole program.
Right. And I think it was a good launch, a good way to kind of kick things off.
It was fate.
Yeah.
So when you had this training, that was the first step, no pun intended, first. you get going, and as far as the structure, how you had to basically, you said you copied our SOP and policy, but you had to put all that in place. Did you have a heavy hand in like the selection process? Selection
of
who's going to be with you to do this
with the committee?
Okay.
I definitely reached out. So yes, for that part.
Okay.
And then we were, if we had the coverage, I think we were going to select a peer support team, but we've kind of put that pillar on pause for now.
And that's being worked on as far as like getting legislation to actually put you under that umbrella of coverage. Yeah,
yes.
It's a big one.
Yes, we have a liaison to the legislation page who is going to work all of her angles, hopefully, and make it happen.
Well, I think it really needs to happen. I mean, just the amount that y'all deal with because you are a branch of law enforcement, because we need you and you need us, and we can arrest bad guys all day, but if we don't keep them in jail, if we don't if we don't put them away for a significant amount of time, or actually get them on paper for however that prosecutorial piece looks, it's already a revolving door. You know, imagine if we didn't have the prosecution piece.
I absolutely see it happening. I mean, we have it for law enforcement, we have it for telecommunicators, so why not for you guys as well?
Thank you.
Who will this initiative serve?
So it serves our whole office. We didn't want to just stop with the prosecutors, because we recognize, obviously, all of our investigators are retired or were police officers.
Got a lot of ours.
A lot of DPD, which thank you. They're great. But you guys, most of our investigators have served this first life, patrol, detectives, everything like that. And then they come to us and they get to see the other side of it too. So they've had trauma from their first career, and now they're getting it from the DA side. So we really wanted to honor that and make sure that they had the resources. And we weren't really sure how they would respond. I mean, maybe it was me, but they bought in right away. I think I got the most responses from investigators that was supportive and excited about it, and a number of them came up and said, "How can I help?" Which
it's a heavy load to carry for years and years.
Yeah.
And I think people are realizing if they're able to get some support in it, it will help.
And I imagine that now that they're removed a little bit from the job, they can probably see the effects or see the difference in how some of those cases affected them. Or
shout out to my old sergeant, Rich Fornes, who's over there with you guys.
Nice. Yeah, we've got a lot of DPD.
Rick Duggan. I mean, there's a lot of folks over there.
Well, Rick he left us.
Oh, did he?
He went to Denton.
Well,
yeah, I'm still a little upset about it. But
dang. I just watched him on the first 48 episode.
Yep.
Sharp dude.
Very, very awesome. Scott Sayers just recently came over.
Yeah.
We've got lots of greats.
Scott's on the list to come on this show.
Okay, good.
Yeah, almost 20 years in homicide. I'm sure we can talk about something.
You'll have a few things.
What were your biggest fears about starting this?
Oh, complete failure. Just complete failure. And I think that there wouldn't be support and there would be so much resistance. And we definitely had some resistance internally. But I think just that it would never get off the ground and that it wouldn't make an impact.
All the pieces seem to have fallen in the right place at the right time. Your heart's in the right place. You had the right leadership to make it happen, and that's really what you need. Those are the building blocks.
Thank you. Yep.
And they started doing. I was looking into all this last night when I heard of the DA Wellness Program. I'm like, that's amazing. It's a fantastic idea, because if we address mental health, it's helpful to everybody. But it looks like they started some studies back in 2016. And they started looking at DAs and understanding that lawyers and law students actually have a higher statistical rate of anxiety and depression.
And
alcoholism, and suicidal ideation. So very similar to police. It's compared to the population in general. Again, you have a disproportionate exposure rate. So it makes sense that those would be higher. So, like, I think society in general, understanding that what you do, you've got the numbers. Statistically speaking, whether you think it's trauma or not, you are having these reactions to what you're doing, and that matters. So having something like this is almost vital if we want to actually have somebody to prosecute.
And I would love to, I know that lawyers in general have been studied, law students, but I would love for prosecutors particularly to be studied, because we're a unique branch of law. But I don't know of any studies out there. So
I'm trying to remember if there was two that I read about. I can look and check if it was prosecutors, because I was looking specifically for DA.
Yeah.
And kind of what because again, what you do is a lot more in depth. And there's just different varying levels of exposure.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily matters, because trauma is trauma. If you're having a reaction, it matters. But I would be willing to bet a lot of money that the statistics are substantially higher for DA.
Yes, I would imagine.
If the study's not out there, then maybe the right person listens to this podcast and
yes,
make it happen.
Challenge laid.
Yeah.
Somebody take it up.
So when you got going, were you surprised that of the support?
Yes and no. Like I said, I was surprised that the investigators were as on board as they were. Now, granted, they were getting TCOL credit for it, so that helps. But I think it was very interesting to see the generational divide in the office. That the younger folks, it was like, well, obviously we're going to do this. Yeah.
Why would we not?
Why? This is crazy. And I think some of the folks that started around the time that I did maybe were a little more hesitant, because it's so different from what we've ever done and the way we've handled things.
Well, same here. I mean, hell, I'm like, I started in 97. I'm old. So if I can change my mindset and my outlook, I know that even the more stubborn folks can.
Sure. Yeah, that's right on par. Exactly the same thing happened here.
Same coping mechanisms, alcoholism is rampant. I mean, we had discussed our alcohol policy with you. I think I shared it with you.
Yes.
And that's a big piece.
Sure.
I mean, it's something nobody wants to talk about, but until somebody makes the news.
Right. And I don't know that we have addressed that as much as we need to. I think
Baby
that's
steps.
kind of the next pillar, perhaps. But so right now we have trained everyone, or it was voluntary, strongly encouraged, but voluntary, on the 2-hour resiliency training. So going through what happens within your brain when these things, you can talk more to that, Amanda, but how it affects you physically, things that you can do to kind of pull you back. And it was great because after the first training, we had at the time a misdemeanor division chat on Teams, and I saw some of them talking about the parasympathetic psi and using the mints. They have an example where they use the mints and your 5 senses, and so knowing that they picked that up and were using it was pretty cool.
Can you talk about that?
The sympathetic and the parasympathetic? Yeah. So effectively, when we're experiencing trauma, you're going to have your system flooded with a lot of different things. The main one that we talk about is cortisol, and that's a stress hormone. And it's not the only one. There's adrenaline, there's all the things. And so our entire system is flooded, and our brain is on alert. And so you'll hear about, parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And what you're trying to do, and there's also the polyvagal, if y'all haven't heard of polyvagal, and understanding like how our bodies respond to that level of stress. So now we understand, because neurobiology is finally catching up to psychology, and it's fantastic. And so we're learning different ways to calm down our systems, because our brains are under the impression that we are in immediate danger. And sometimes, like with police officers, when you are on scene, you are. But oftentimes it's after the event happened, or when you're combing through everything in the DA's office, and you're not actually in danger in that moment. And so we learn different ways to calm down our systems and kind of reset and realize that we are safe, we are okay, and we've got to kind of slow down that process of the dump of the cortisol and adrenaline and so different things. And my favorite thing is water. Like, I drink a huge amount of water just being a trauma therapist. So understanding how our bodies react to these things and how to calm them down and remind ourselves that we're safe and it's okay. can make a huge impact.
So tell me, because I don't know, when you drink water, what is the effect?
So think of it like a massage. When you get a massage and they release all of the knots in your back, and they always tell you after to drink water because you have all of these things in your system now, because it can make you nauseated. It's the same thing. So one of the things I do with Sergeant Fig and our psych eds, and it was so funny because it's just a normal thing for me because I've been doing trauma therapy for almost 20 years now. And so water's like just a vital part of it. But the one takeaway, I was like, what worked, guys? What did it? And they're like, water. I'm like, water? Out of everything I just went through, your one takeaway is water? And they're like, yeah, that's amazing. We didn't know. When your body is flooded, you have all of these stress hormones like coursing through you. And if we don't take care of our cortisol levels, and cortisol is fun because that's where you gain weight right around the midsection. So when we see a lot of officers and first responders have a little bit of a belly, that's actually a trauma response. Yeah. So again, neurobiology, biology is catching up with psychology. So when we take care of ourselves and like during the event, during the trial, when you're going through and combing through the evidence, if you're spending hours watching horrible things, which you are tasked to do, having a lot of water with you and finding different ways you can actually do the five senses or anything to kind of calm down and remind yourself that you are safe, it helps. And the water actually flushes things out of the system faster. Does that make sense?
It does.
Our officers love having you come do our psych eds because it's very educational and useful after having been through a traumatic event and having experienced one.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Jennifer. Do you, as far as going to the beyond the first training, and do you do anything like other pieces of education? Like we do a newsletter here that we send out every 7 or 8 weeks, and things like that, like just even listening to her talk about the water. I think that would be a good piece for a section for the newsletter to kick off, or we'll have a section about EMDR or ART or just stuff like that.
We're working on it.
Okay. Well, if you need any help on as far as the guidance on that, I gladly will.
I will shamelessly.
Oh no!
Take everything you give me.
We're in this together.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that we pushed so hard, and it felt sometimes like we were pushing a boulder uphill. That I think we all collectively kind of collapsed after, a little bit after the last training, kind of went, okay, we need a break.
Yeah.
So I think we're just now getting back to where, we want to kind of go to the next phase, which is education, but in a more interactive way. We would like to bring, yoga and nutrition and some of those stretching that, Chase does with First and some of those things that we would love to do that, kind of talking about water. Yeah. All of those things.
We actually have a yoga class that we have every monthly, and you guys are invited.
Yeah.
And also
look at that.
We have a Fight Club, which is alcohol rehab for first responders only.
Fantastic.
You guys are invited to that too. So, we need to collaborate a little bit more and
absolutely
and get things going. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think knowing, looking into EAP, knowing that there's a number of sessions covered is great, but I love that DPA, ATO, that you provide free counseling. And eventually I would love to be able to provide that to folks in our office as well. And we're just not there yet.
Just to throw it out there for anybody who doesn't know what EAP is, it's Employee Assistance Program.
Yes.
And it's normally through your insurance, which offers 6 to 8 sessions for free?
I think for attorneys, it's either 5 or 6, and then I think for the investigators, it might be 7 or 8.
Okay. And that's something. And there are some fabulous therapists that are on it, but not many.
And that was important to us to make sure that we were sending folks to the right people, to, the people that were culturally competent.
Absolutely.
And
game changer.
Yeah. And hopefully they have. That's probably the one thing that we can't measure, obviously, with privacy and all of that. But I think based on the responses after the trainings, with the, folks going up to people and saying, how do I get that? And I made sure and typed everything out. You call this number, and then you call this, and then you do this step by step. Hopefully some folks have utilized that.
Yeah, I want to share with you our newsletter again. And then also I need to show you this too, Amanda. We have this critical incident response sheet that we send out, and it basically has what to expect from a physiological standpoint, and then we send that out to folks. I need to be better, more consistent at that. But there was an incident that happened at the property room of all places, and last year, and I had sent that out to the whole unit, and one of the supervisors told me that 2 of the people actually went and got help.
Great.
Because just from education. That's all this is about, is getting
Well, I
out
wanted
there.
to make it as easy as possible.
Yes.
I know that when people are in crisis, the last thing they want to do is research.
Right.
Right? They're
And
not going to take that time.
That is why you do the proactive. That's the importance of the proactive nature of this is you educate, and when something does happen, that seed has been planted already, and they know exactly where to go.
It's a trusted source, too. It's a trusted source where to go, and like you kind of built that, and you're the person. They come to you, and that being said, if somebody was to walk in, or Amanda, you just say, "Hey, Joe, I think I need to go to rehab." I mean, I would know. I could get her onboarded within the hour to one of our facilities that we have vetted.
Yeah.
So that's my job. Mm-hmm. If you needed something for your kid, your teenager that may be cutting, I have something for that too.
Yeah.
That is what I do now. So that's
You're a social worker.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I passed the buck to somebody else, so let somebody else handle it. But that's a part of it too, dealing with families. I mean because we haven't even talked about this, about the home life. Hell, police profession is notorious for divorce and relationship issues. I mean, it's no secret.
Sure.
So I would imagine, some of these, you have to go home and
All the prep work, yeah.
All the prep work, yeah. You're doing a lot probably from home when you leave that office, prepping for cases.
Yeah, trial prep. We really don't have the space or time at work because we have so much to do that I think most of us prep for trial on the weekends and at home, unpaid, of course. And so I think I remember I was working on a capital, and I had the pictures all over, the island in my kitchen.
With the strings going like on the movie.
Yeah, that would have been more organized. And my friends walked in and were, startled, maybe is a good word. And it didn't even occur to me that I should turn over the pictures, and so they didn't see this guy's brains.
But do you see why that normalizes what you do? If a civilian, like even seeing that as something like, oh no, that might be too much for someone to see. Can you see how that would count as trauma?
Now that you say it like that, yes, absolutely.
If we're shielding civilians from things because it's so heavy, and if you saw a civilian who experienced that and you thought, oh my gosh, I can understand why that would feel like trauma, then we kind of need to take it back and look at what we're doing.
Yes.
Because it's trauma.
And I think the first time I really had that moment was while I was in child abuse, and I had a group of friends that were in the fashion, I guess, industry, so to speak. And I remember we were out one night and they were discussing the different color of gold.
Oh yeah.
And talking about, rose gold versus yellow gold. And I had just interviewed a 5-year-old talking about these horrific things that had happened. And I remember thinking, our jobs are not the same.
No.
Yeah.
And I am not going to share with you what I did today so that you don't have to carry. It's that whole, sheepdog thing where you were carrying that burden.
Yeah, you can't even tell your story. I mean, it would ruin the gold and magenta coordination conversation.
Yeah, kind of brings the
And
the
you're
party
worried about
You probably wouldn't be
your friends.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't be invited back.
No.
Not to those events.
Yeah,
Not to those events.
Keep her away.
But that's what we need to look at. We need to look at that if we would not share this with the general population.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's also something to keep in mind is one of my biggest things, and I think an important push for my practice with Finding Freedom Therapy, we try to say is that we want to normalize it up front and help people continue to do the jobs that they're doing and that they love doing. If we get help early on so we don't have to come to Joe when it's time for rehab, and we normalize up front and get help going through it initially and normalize what we're going through, not only are we keeping ourselves healthier so we can continue doing what we love, but we're also helping society and keeping our streets and our civilians safer because we're nicer to them. Yeah, we're healthier.
There's that. Being nice is a good thing. And I think being able to empathize with the victims and their families, I think.
Without burning out and shutting down.
Yeah, or being jaded, completely jaded. I think that's one thing that officers are known for, and we might be as well. at a certain point.
You are.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yes, you were known
It's
for this.
it's a coping mechanism.
So important to develop that healthy
Yes.
coping mechanism instead of falling to
Yeah.
alcohol
And remembering why we
or
do what we
substance
do.
abuse or
Right.
having problems at home.
Yeah, and recognizing that, with the child abuse metaphor, that even a touch is the worst thing that's ever happened to that family and that child, even if it's not the most horrific case you've ever had.
It still counts.
And trying to remember, I'm meeting this person, this family and talking to them about the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and trying to honor that and their experience, I think, is something that I pride myself on.
And that's easier to do when you have the support to carry that weight.
Yeah, and I would like to also, we found a few things that hopefully will help our trial court prosecutors a little bit, because we do have this aspect of being social workers, right? We have families that come in, they're in crisis, they're going through things that they shouldn't have to go through, they need help too, and trying to sometimes find them the resources. Again, we didn't even have any for ourselves, so we have a few things hopefully that we can start providing to them, where they can connect people with social workers, with counselors right there on the spot, and kind of take that burden off of the prosecutor. And
That would be good.
yeah,
One less stressor.
So that's at the next phase for me, hopefully.
Today I'm going to send you it's a list of videos that put together for officers' kids, and it basically talks about stress management, anger management, trauma, dealing with trauma, but they're kid videos. But if you watch them, they're very easy to digest, but they're the same education that the adults get. It's kind of like the Inside
Nice.
Out. But I'll send you that list,
Yeah,
and
that'd
that's
be great.
something you can actually share with some of the victims, and for the kids, they're really, really good little videos. I had my daughter watch those.
Fantastic.
And I do that with my adults, because I work mainly with military. And I always let them know, I was like, I'm showing this kind of from a kid's perspective because you were never educated on this growing up. You have no experience with this, so why would you understand how emotions work? Why would you understand how your body reacts to these things? So it's not even it's not meant to be disrespectful, but sometimes having such complicated things explained in such a simple way is very helpful. And it's a good way to normalize that we're all going through this, and we need to be teaching it in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I got one final question for you. How proud are you you're just in the beginning stages of this, but when it's all said and done, that you're actually building something that could help generations of prosecutors in that building and beyond, and their families?
Obviously, if it has that impact, I will be very proud. I recognize I'm not the only one that's been involved. This has been a team effort for sure, but I hope that it will have a lasting impact. I think even knowing, we had a couple articles come out about the program, and different agencies, offices have reached out to us. So even knowing that it could impact or hopefully influence another DA's office to get on board and start a program of their own is incredible. But I think I don't think we're done yet. And so I don't feel that pride yet, because there's so much more I feel like we need to do to be completely effective. But that is the hope, is that this will impact generations. And I think that was one of the things that my chief, Jeff Keller, and I in misdemeanor would always say, is that we are impacting generations of prosecutors in this office. And so I think that's the mentality that hopefully has come into this program as well.
ATO family, the great Jennifer Morse, Dallas DA's office. She is planting trees that she will not see the shade of.